Welcome to F&I Today with Paul Brown, exclusively on CBT News.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of F&I Today, exclusively here on CBT News. I'm Paul Brown, Vice President of Ascent Dealer Services. F&I Today is dedicated to providing F&I training techniques and solutions to drive higher CSI and more profits to your dealership's bottom line. Today, we're going to talk about where does F&I begin. When I go into stores and I talk to dealers and we come up with a game plan for coaching their stores, they always say, well, where does F&I begin? When should F&I get involved? And my answer is simply this. It begins when the customer walks in the door. That's when F&I should begin, and our focus on F&I should begin at that time. So when I had my store and I was running it, we looked at everything that happened within our store because there's a couple things that are happening in our stores, right? And they're still happening today, same as they happened 10 years ago. It's hard to make money on new cars. It's getting harder to make money on pre-owned vehicles. So we have to make it in F&I and we have to make it in the service department, right? And fortunately, F&I and the service department are symbiotic. They have that relationship where they feed one another. If we sell F&I products that happily get the customer engaged in our service department, customer is going to come back and buy another car from us. If they buy another car from us and those F&I products have served them well, then they'll buy the F&I products again and then they'll get re-engaged with our service department. So it's this circle of life that keeps going round and around, but that all begins when the customer walks in the door. What do I mean by that? Well, I don't mean that F&I has to be out there greeting customers, which I'm not saying that they shouldn't, right? They should not be in their office. They should be out helping us make car deals. But F&I happens when we have a philosophy in sales of what is our end goal. And we don't have to tell the sales people that the end goal is to have the best possible turnover to F&I. But we know as dealers, as general managers, and even as finance managers, that that's one of the most important departments, right? We need to do everything that we can up front to make sure that when the customer gets into F&I, they're already primed for that experience. And we've already given them some information and asked some questions early that allow us to have a more elegant conversation once F&I actually takes over on the deal. But F&I should be involved from the beginning. So what does that look like? Well, we looked at everything from what kind of questions are our salespeople asking our customers when they do their needs analysis? Are they asking questions that are F&I centric? Are they asking questions that lead to a good turnover to F&I? And what we found is that most of them were not. Most of the questions that they had were guided towards selling the car, which is important. So we just sprinkled some of these F&I questions in there so that, again, when F&I got involved, they didn't have to do an interview. We always laugh about, going out and when an F&I person says, I got to go out and do my customer interview. And it's like, what are you interviewing them for? Do they want to come work here? Do they want to work in the office? Do they want to sell cars? What do you mean you're doing an interview? And when we do that, it feels just like that. It feels like we're sitting in front of somebody being pre-qualified, that it's an interview process, and that feels terrible to the customer. They don't want to be grilled with a bunch of questions like, how many miles do you drive a year? How long are you going to keep the car? What are the roads like where you drive? Do you garage the car at work? Do you garage it at home? We don't need to ask all that stuff anymore. If we ask better questions up front with the salespeople, and then we ask better questions in F&I, we'll just get a lot of that information without having to do an interview. So now what we're going to do is more of a needs analysis with the customer. Just what exactly is the customer looking for out of this experience? And how do we find that out? Well, we have the salespeople ask a lot of questions about how the customer got here. What were they trying to accomplish today when they came in? But more importantly, we are creatures of habit as human beings. And what we find is that people tend to make the same decisions over and over, especially if those decisions have served them well. So what we find is that if we can find out what the customer has decided in the past and why they made those decisions, we will have a really good idea of what decisions they're going to make now and in the future. So we ask a lot of questions about their past, about the vehicle that they're trading in, about other vehicles in their household. How have they used them? Why did they pick them? What was important? If they could change one thing about it, what would it be? What was one thing that they really loved, right? What's one thing on the new car that they're really excited about? And we ask a lot of these questions. And then now F&I, if the sales associate is talking to the customer and they're saying, it looks like on this car based off when you bought it, that you drive about 18,000 miles a year. Is that kind of like what your driving habits are going to be? Salesperson can ask that question. Because when finance asks it, guess what? They go, oh, they're going to try and sell me a warranty. Customer's guard immediately goes up. So we get the salespeople to ask some good questions for us. When the salesperson is getting the customer's car appraised right before they go on a demo ride on the new car, they can simply ask the question or make the statement, hey, my used car manager says that all used cars have some new parts. Before I have him take a look at it, why don't you tell me what new parts are on your car so that I can make sure that they appraise it and get you the most money that we can for it. Now we get into a conversation. We get into a conversation of what kind of money has the customer spent on the car on maintenance? What kind of money have they spent on repairs? And all of those things, when we frame it that way, now the customer is going to give us all that information because they're thinking, I need to tell this salesperson every great thing about my car before they go appraise it and put a dollar figure on it. So they're going to tell us all the things. When F&I asks that question later on, the guard goes up and they're going, I'm not going to tell them that I had a $1,200 AC repair because they're going to use that to sell me a service contract, right? They know what's going to happen in F&I. So ask some better questions earlier, and then we kind of get to where F&I doesn't have to do so much of a needs analysis or so much of a customer interview because we've got a lot of the information. So what questions are we asking with the salespeople? Are they taking notes? Are they required to? Are they required to ask these questions? Are they allowed to come up to the desk and get numbers for the customer if they don't have all of the information? My answer to that would simply be no. Go back out and gather the rest of the information. And we can show salespeople later how all this information that they're gathering helps them, right? Because a lot of times salespeople won't do things that don't benefit them, or they won't do them as well if they don't feel like it benefits them. So we can show them how, like we could do a total cost of ownership close and things like that, that this is why you're gathering that information. But really we want them to take great notes so that they can give that to the F&I manager, and the F&I manager can now have a better conversation with the customer. F&I, getting involved, coaching their salespeople, right? If you're an F&I manager out there and you want to figure out how to make more money in F&I, start pouring into your salespeople. Start pouring into them with some of these things and have them gather a little bit of this information, show them how it benefits them, and then that way, if they have a better understanding of what you do, they will be more likely to help you because they're going to understand that these things truly benefit their customers. That you're not just somebody sitting back in your ivory tower in an office just trying to make their customers' payments go up $120 a month. That's not what we do. We provide products that have value, that give the customer the experience that they deserve to have. Not only that they want to have, but that they deserve to have. And when that happens, then the customer is happy, and guess what? They come back to Johnny Smith and buy another car. So it's customer retention. F&I products are customer retention for the store, but they're customer retention for the sales associate as well. So that's one thing that we need to do. F&I needs to get involved early in a lot of other things. In my store, we kind of had a rule. If you weren't actively working on submitting a deal, if you didn't have a customer in front of you, or you weren't working on some version of CIT, as an F&I manager, you weren't in your office. You were either out on the showroom floor pouring into salespeople, you were at the desk helping them structure deals, or you were out shaking hands and kissing babies. At some level, your finance professionals should be like politicians. They should be out doing early introductions and introducing themselves to the customer and letting them know who they are and that they might possibly see them later if they do decide to purchase with us today. They should be out moving around and being servant leaders. And we're going to talk about that in further episodes as we go. But so when does F&I start? It starts at the beginning with the customer. It doesn't start when they bring a deal to F&I and they go, all right, we got a deal for you. I mean, that's when kind of the meat and potatoes of it starts, but all the other stuff is laying the groundwork. And if we lay the groundwork early and we do a good job of caring for the customer early, then what we find is when they hand us that deal jacket because they've made a deal and we start doing our thing, the F&I process technically starts, we're submitting the deal and preparing a menu and doing all that kind of stuff. Well, what we find is that now all the conversations that we need to have with the customer at that point becomes so much easier because we got involved earlier and we have our salespeople prepared to ask certain questions and guide conversations in certain ways and plant certain seeds. We're out at the desk working with them and making sure that, hey, maybe this structure is a little bit off, right? Maybe we shouldn't be looking at 140% at 84 months on a 2017, right? Maybe we need to switch cars or we need to switch structure, and they can be doing things to help there. But more importantly, if they're out at the desk, for my finance peeps that are watching this, if you're at the desk, guess what you get to do real early? You get to get involved, take a TO. Don't be afraid. Get out there and get involved and take that early TO, because what happens is they're going to start cutting back the F&I stuff, right? They're going to start extending term. They're going to start doing things like that. Go protect your own money. Get involved early. Have a conversation. Close that deal up. You start to do that and start closing deals for the desk, then what you find is now the desk wants to take care of you more. So they're calling you going, hey, we've got this customer, this is our structure, this is kind of what we're looking at, what do you think? Rather than just committing to the customer and then painting you in a corner. So get involved out at your desk, be out there and make sure that you're taking early TOs. That's also when finance should start. You should be involved, I would say after the first set of numbers, go out and close that car deal up. Protect your own money, protect the back end of the F&I, because who's the strongest closer in the store? All of my sales managers and GMs that are watching this, put your earmuffs on real quick, but finance are the best closers in the store. They just are. They do it more often than everybody else. And we're selling intangible products and getting customers to pay a lot of extra money for those products, so it is a tougher kind of sale. They are your strength. So don't leave your ego at the door, sales managers. Let your finance person get out there. Finance manager, get out of your ivory tower, quit growing roots to your chair, and go get involved in the car deals. Finance does not start when they hand you a deal. It starts when the customer walks in the door. Thanks for joining us on today's show. I'm Paul Brown with Ascent Dealer Services, and I'll see you next time for another episode of F&I Today, exclusively here on CBT News.
Thanks for watching F&I Today with Paul Brown, exclusively on CBT News.